Hi, I'm Greg Gordon, and you're watching The Breakdown, live from Pyramind. So today, my guest is Shawn Mercado, a.k.a. Merc. What's up, Shawn?
Hey, how's it doing?
It's going great. It's good to have you here.
Good to be here.
So this is a really cool track that you brought in today, and I want to break it down a little with you. But first, let's tell our viewers a little bit about, about the track and how it's hitting. This is a collaboration between two Bay Area natives, you and James Smith, a.k.a. FreeFall.
Yep.
And I guess I should also mention that you are a former Pyramind student, graduate of our training programs here, right?
Yep.
That's cool. And you are also now our DJ instructor here.
Yes.
Right? DJ 101,
and
201, and 110, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yep.
So let's start just by talking about the collaboration between you and FreeFall and how that worked, because you guys didn't actually get in the same room together when you worked on this track, right?
No.
So tell us a little bit about that.
I started this track that was kind of geared towards that darker, techie bass house style, and I got a pretty decent amount of it done, but really just like the skeleton of it. So I got a cool bass line and cool groove going that I liked. I did a vocal on it
What
myself.
you consider to be like a scratch vocal at the time?
Yeah, it was kind of just to get my ideas out there. I like to just sit down and just pump stuff out as fast as possible.
So I didn't know you were a singer.
It's like spoken word, kind of pitched down, housey stuff.
Yeah, I know. I checked it out. It's totally cool.
Yeah, but yeah, it was definitely just kind of meant to be temporary, but it ended up being in the final track.
How did the technical process then of collaboration work? Because as I understand it, he did not work in Ableton, right?
He's in Logic.
He's in Logic.
Logic X.
Okay,
Yeah.
so how do you guys work together with one in Ableton and the other in Logic?
I used to work in Logic, and I thought about trying to just get back into Logic and do it that way. But since I already had a good idea of what I wanted the track to, the vibe of the track and what I wanted it to sound like, I just decided it would be easier to use stems. So after getting his feedback on the track and knowing he was down to collab and he wanted to work on it, I just printed some stems, which was just a rough like drum mix, and the kick was separate, I believe, just so if he wanted to mix that differently. But just a nice like grouped submixes of stems. So like percussion, vocals, hi-hats I think were separate as well, and then like some effects like white noise and snare rises and build-ups and fills and bass line and kind of stuff like that.
Cool. So when you output those from Ableton, did you use the groups that we're looking at on the screen here? I noticed you've got like a kick group here.
Yes.
You've got a percussion group.
Yeah.
You've got a vocal group. So did you use those as the output for the submixes?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I just wanted to keep it simple. It's already a pretty simple track, so there wasn't that much to it when we first started with this first draft.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to keep it simple. Sometimes if you go to collaborate with someone or do a remix or something like that, and you get a folder of stems that's like 40 stems or 40 different wave files, it can be a little bit scattered and overwhelming. So I just wanted to make it simple and dial in the workflow and have it be quick.
Cool. So what was the timeline like from beginning to end? How long did it take you guys to create this?
Pretty quick. I worked on it for a good maybe 4 sessions that were, some of them were 3 hours, some of them were 8 hours or 7 hours or something like that. But just I did a couple sessions on it, sent it to him, he did a couple, and just kind of back and forth, and it really didn't take that long.
Cool. Can you play us a bit of that? Maybe play us either the breakdown or the drop section, just so we get a little feel for what you're talking about.
So coming out of the intro, the 16-bar intro, and going into the breakdown, it's pretty much empty. So you'll listen if I'm coming out of the breakdown or the intro. It just kind of goes to silence, and then it starts to pick up after 8 bars. So, yeah, I mean, you're coming out of the intro and you have basically 8 bars of silence that I just left open because I wanted James to fill in like a cool ambient breakdown or write some cool melody in there.
So you knew kind of ahead of time what you were looking for him to do, so that you kind of said, hey, I know you're really good at these things,
Yeah.
and I'm going to give you a framework
Exactly.
to basically dial it in.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Exactly. I think what's cool about this collab is you can clearly hear what is from me and what is from James, because he definitely has a signature sound with his bass house stuff and his sound design and his melodies. He does a lot of like kind of soundscape ambient cool breakdowns, and I go for like the really rhythmic kind of groovy drops. And so I did what I knew I was good at, and then I left stuff open for him where I knew he could kill it and just come in and fill in the gaps.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So since this is your session and what you did, let's just take a look at some of those elements.
Okay.
Like, for example, let's talk a little bit about your kick. You've got a kick group here. I noticed you've got a regular kick and an FX kick. And I think, so are they both MIDI tracks there?
Yes.
Yeah.
So these are both MIDI, and I'm using this kick plugin. It's by Nicky Romero. And usually I don't use plugins like this because they're kind of limited and they only do one thing. But since buying this plugin, I have not used a sampled kick.
You can totally custom dial your kick for every track with this.
Exactly.
Right? Let's take a look at that. Let's see what you dialed in here.
Yeah. So if I prop this open, I have my user kicks that I've made, and if I go in here, I have an 808 that I've made. I have another one underneath it that has some distortion on it for like some kind of mid thickness. I have a couple house kicks that I use pretty much for all my house tracks, and then I have some similar 808 style trap kicks that I've made.
Cool.
And basically what this plugin allows you to do is completely customize and create your kicks from a standard sine wave.
Right.
So in the bottom right here, you have your pitch envelope, and you can just from different keys or different notes, you can just pitch the tail out of your kick and the beginning click top end of it. You have an amp envelope, so you can shape it, and if you really want it to be like a subby, boomy kick, you can drag out your...
You can drag out the sustain on that.
The sustain, you have your release, you have your attack, everything. And you can add more of these breakpoints in here to customize it even further. Moving along, we have the kick, the click for the kick, which is hugely important because you have over here on the right, you have this kind of library of all these different samples that they've loaded in here. So you can make a kick for a hip hop track, you can make a kick for a house track, you can make a kick that simulates a live drum set that sounds like a band. So it's just crazy the amount of customizing you can do to your kick drums. And then you have control over sub level and drive and distortion if you want to add stuff like that. And it's just insanely helpful because with a lot of this dance music, there might be some really good sample kick drums out there and really good samples that sample packs have provided you. But a lot of the times with this dance music, you might find a really good kick drum that you like, but it might not be in the right key of your track. So you could have this kick in there that's kind of fitting in with your bass line, but it might be clashing because it's not in key with your track, which is hugely important with this electronic music. So instead of having a sample and warping that and changing the key or like transposing your kick drum to key it like either up or down to fit your track, which a lot of times causes a lot of weird artifacts and ruins that sample. You can just go in here and go into your pitch and say, okay, this track is in A minor, so I can just pitch, I can pitch the beginning, and then really the part that matters is your sustain and kind of the tail end, low end of that kick drum. So
that's really the tonality of it. Right?
Exactly. So to get that to just glue into the rest of the track and fit perfectly with that bass line, you just come in here and you set the kind of release or sustain, the bottom end of this kick drum to A. And then you're just sitting right where
So can you just solo that up for us for a second?
Yeah.
Let's just hear a little bit of it.
Definitely. Really punchy, really short. This track is the bass line. The way the bass line is arranged is just really simple, and the first couple notes of it are just right on the beat, just 1, 2, 3. So it's just really punchy. It has a nice, like, crisp top end on it, and then the track underneath it, I usually just have my regular kick, which is my top track here, and then I have my effects kick. So I will actually copy and paste the same kick that I've made for the regular or for the main kick of the track, and then I'll put it on this effects track and EQ it and take out some of the low end so that I have sort of like for the intro, just to not give away the full kick yet, move around some of these MIDI clips, and you can have maybe throughout your drop you have a 16 bar drop, and then the last like bar is kind of a drum fill or maybe a synth melody plays, and then you switch to that effects kick, and then when everything comes back in, you go back to your regular kick, and it just emphasizes kind of the change and call and response between stuff like that.
Cool. So let's hear it with the bass line here, and let's take a look at that now.
Okay. And the bass line has a lot of top end too, and that's because I have my low layer down here. A distorted, kind of gritty, like mid-low layer for that, and then I have the top, which is like a pretty thin but tonal, clicky top end, and then together. And then with the bass line, they kind of just fit right in between each other. Really short kick, but really punchy, and then the bass line kind of just sits right on top of it, and they're just playing back in between, or just playing off of each other, which is great for this style of music because it leaves tons of room for percussion and hi-hats just to flow in between. So going into that, I just kind of had this idea for like just short, really attacky, punchy kick and bass line.
Really cool. So what are you using for the bass itself?
So I use Serum heavily. If I'm doing like just like a quick sub or something like that, I'll use Massive, or maybe sometimes if I'm going for like a more progressive style, I'll use Silent. But lately, especially with this style, I've been using a ton of Serum. So all this stuff is already audio because I like to get my sound dialed in, and then I just convert and consolidate, or just freeze and flatten in Ableton.
Why do you do that?
To audio. Basically just workflow. I mean, I just, over the past 4 or 5 years that I've been producing, I used to leave everything in MIDI so I could go back and tweak stuff, and that was exactly the problem, is that I would have a sound that I got really cool, or I worked on until like 3 in the morning one night, and I was really happy with it, and I'd wake up the next day and be like, oh, it could be a little bit cooler, and then I'd go back into the synth, tweak a bunch of stuff, and then I'm completely just changing what I had already done.
And that's exactly how you don't get a track done in 2 weeks, right?
Exactly. And especially being in Ableton, working with audio is insanely efficient and fast. And for me lately, that's what it's been all about. I've found that the tracks that I produce best and the tracks that I'm happy with are the ones that I can sit down and pretty much crank out in one sitting.
Nice.
Yeah. So.
And do you find that makes a big difference in the mix process?
Yeah.
I mean, is there a sonic difference, do you think, when you're converting it to audio versus keeping it as MIDI?
MIDI definitely changes. So, I mean, if you play back one time and you're listening to your drop and then you play it back again, MIDI's kind of always altering stuff. And that could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing, but definitely once you convert to audio, you're just solid in sticking with what you have. And it's not going to change unless you're processing it differently or something like that.
Okay, so we've now opened up the actual final mix session, so we can actually hear some of what FreeFall contributed and how the actual mix came together. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you've translated this into a final mix?
Yeah, so like I was saying in the beginning when I started this track, I had a really vague idea of what I wanted to do, and I kind of just laid out the skeleton of the track. And when I handed it off to James and sent him the stems for it, he crushed it. So he added a really cool melody, he added some ambient stuff in the breakdown, and then his sound design or like synth work in the breakdown, or kind of in between my bass line and drop, was just awesome. So
let's check some of that out. Let's just give us a little listen to that section there so we get a little feel for it.
Cool. And then it kind of splashes into the breakdown. But right away you can hear the difference between the version that I had in the beginning and now what it has come to.
Oh yeah, it's a lot bigger sounding, and it's got some really nice ambient reverb.
Exactly. Yeah. So those plucks that James added, he kind of had just kind of building up in the intro and leading into the breakdown. He took pieces of that vocal that I did, which we now made into, we actually kept in the final version. He took pieces of that and kind of scattered them throughout the track. And then in the breakdown, really ambient and really just open, and that's kind of what we wanted. So the vocal comes in and kind of just starts building up with
down to the underground.
And so by listening to the drop, you can hear in some of those gaps that I had in my bass line that James filled in with his stuff.
Right, like was that like the wah, 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 wah?
Yeah, so at the end, and then there's a little bit there's some pieces throughout the beginning of the drop as well. And then as it progresses through the drop, you can hear where James just went crazy with his sound design, and it's awesome. Right there is when it gets kind of crazy with his stuff, and it's awesome. So he cut up the vocal and he started to pitch it down a little bit more in later sections. But yeah, you can hear how the two kind of mold together now.
Yeah, it makes for great conversation, and I think that's what makes for great music.
Yeah.
When you have all these elements kind of talking to each other,
Yep.
you know, the high end's kind of tickling your ears, the bass is really bumping, and then there's a whole conversation happening throughout.
Exactly, and that's what's cool is I kind of laid down the foundation with that one really simple bass line, and then you can just hear elements of James's or FreeFall's stuff throughout what I did. It's really cool. Yeah.
Nice. And what's this track that we're looking at here? Because I see you've got a glue compressor on here.
So this is
and
basically
you've got the LFO tool going.
Yeah. So this is the main group for the bass line. So if I solo that. So that's the beginning.
Really percussive bass line too.
Yeah, so really percussive, and then you can hear everything that FreeFall added, and I kind of just went back in here, cleaned some stuff up, and then really, I mean, the glue compressor is just to get everything just glued together that much more. Everything was mixed pretty tight already, but I wanted to make sure that if there was any transients or anything kind of jumping out to catch that with the glue compressor. And then the LFO tool, this is an awesome plugin as well, and it's basically just set up to kind of, well, the way I use it is to do side chaining. So you set it up on like quarter notes, and then it'll kind of hit with your kick, and then you shape it. You can completely shape it around your kick drum. And this stuff was already side chained. I just wanted to compress it, glue it all together, and then as a whole put that LFO tool on there to get it all to kind of bounce and move with each other.
Cool. Can you bypass that LFO tool for us for a second and then play it, and then let's play it with it in just to hear the difference.
Yep. Let's go down here. So
that was bypassed, right?
Yeah, so they're still sidechained and pretty close to where they should be. I just wanted to get them all kind of grooving together. So with the LFO tool, still really percussive, but you can hear them pulsing together, which kind of helps with the groove of the track. Totally. So when everything else and the kick drums in there, it gives room for the kick, it gives room for that ride and the hi-hats and everything else to sit on top of it nicely.
Sweet.
Yep.
Pretty dope. And are you doing anything on your master bus? Are you actually mastering this at the same time that you're mixing this?
Yeah, so the mix was already really close, which always makes mastering that much easier. I think one thing that people make mistakes on is they are in the mix or they're producing the track and they're just kind of done with it and they want to move on and just finish it and master it. And they're thinking like, okay, well that's there, but I can fix it in mastering. It's always best to get the mix as clean and perfect as you can. So when you go into mastering, all you're really doing is compressing and kind of like bringing stuff to the right level. So yeah, I mean the mix was already really tight. So all I did was some simple EQing on here with Fabfilter Pro Q, just to bump some of the low, like low mid.
And you're rolling off a good amount on the bottom end and top end there, huh?
Yeah, what's cool about this EQ is even though what's really like audible for humans is anything above 20 hertz and anything below 20K, it gives you room above and below that. So I just did a cut at 21, just to kind of, if there's any kind of mud stuff that maybe even people wouldn't hear when they're listening to it, that might be stuff you feel if you're in a club with huge subwoofers. You might feel some of that muddiness. So I just cut that around 21 just to help with clarity, and then again at the top around 20K. Pretty simple EQ, and then I used Fabfilter Pro C for my compressor, and then I just kind of made sure to get it at a decent volume before going into the like imaging and limiter. So I backed off the attack and release to just let the track breathe and not kind of squash it too quick and ruin transients or anything like that.
So a slower attack, slower release,
yeah,
just to catch the big pops on it.
Exactly, and then I'm kind of just using the in and out gain on that to get it to pretty close to redlining. So I have still a little bit of headroom when I'm going into the imaging or the imager and limiter. So
you're using Ozone 5 to expand your stereo image on this?
Yes. So a lot of Fabfilter, Ozone is great, nothing really special. Sometimes I'll go into a studio and run my stuff through hardware, but again, this mix was really close, so I thought just a simple mastering chain would do just fine. And I'm not doing too much spreading. Most of it is in the high end, and then I kind of just set my bands. So for the low end, I have 20 hertz to 150, and then for like mid-low, 150 to 1K, and then 1K to 5K, 5K to the top, which is 20K. And then kind of throughout the imager, just keep the low end stuff right in the middle. And then the mid-low is going to be just kind of just sitting right above that low end stuff, because you don't want to spread it out too much, or else you'll lose kind of the power of the track. And then the mid-high stuff and the high, I'm just panning out to get like a nice spread within the frequencies.
So in a way, it's kind of like an inverted pyramid, right?
Exactly.
You've got from the low end, and as you go up the frequency spectrum, you're
An
spreading it out
pyramid.
more. An inverted pyramid. I like it. Awesome.
So after that, I just go to the limiter as my final mastering device,
Just
to kind of put
saturate
a brick wall on everything. And yeah, I mean, I'm not crushing it too much. It's loud enough without being like crushed too much or clipping or anything like that. So you'll notice. Since this track has a lot of space, you can kind of see those transients that are jumping up into the limiter, and the limiter's catching. But it's not being squashed too much. I wanted to give everything room because it's a pretty dynamic track.
Right. It's not. I don't think it was. From what I saw, it's not squashing more than -3 or so.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, I mean, pretty simple mastering chain.
But effective, you know.
Exactly.
Because you've done all the work coming into it, so it didn't require a heavy hit on the mastering.
Coming into this session with these new stems from James, and starting a new session that was just for the mix, it just allows everything to be that much cleaner. So you're getting these new stems that are already mixed pretty well. You start a new mix session, get everything kind of dialed in that much cleaner, and then do your mastering, and it's kind of like everything's just already clean and simple. When you're going in your mastering, it just makes it nice and easy.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you want to point out?
I think that's about it.
Yeah, that was great.
Yep.
All right. Well, that was awesome, Shawn. Thanks so much for being here and doing this today. Really appreciate it. I'm Greg Gordon. Thanks for watching the breakdown on Pyramind. For more videos like this, please subscribe to our channel, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Peace out.
Peace.
Underground.